with tremors felt across the Bay Area. The US Geological Survey put the epicenter close to Berkeley with a shallow depth of 8 kilometers. Data from the US Geological Survey indicated that the quake had a magnitude of 4.3. Initial reports indicate that a preliminary earthquake with 2.4 magnitude also took place around 12:50 a.m. their time near Petrolia in California. Now we move on to our next news. Russia's defense ministry has said that its forces have taken control of the settlement of Kalynivsky in Ukraine's Dnipropetrovsk region. While the news has not been independently verified, it would make Kalynivsky the fourth settlement in disputed territories to be claimed by Russia over the last week. Russian forces over the last week have entered the eastern side of Dnipropetrovsk and have been trying to establish a foothold in the industrial heartland, as confirmed by Ukrainian authorities. Now, for this discussion, we are joined by Mohammed Osman. He's an international relations specialist joining us live from Cairo. Thank you, Mohammed, for staying with us. So how could this rapid succession of territorial claims by Russia affect the dynamics of ongoing conflict and also Ukraine's defensive strategy in these four regions?
Of course, it reinforces Russia's stance on the ground, and it basically strengthens their negotiating position in any future diplomatic process or endeavor, which is highly unlikely at this point, given the battlefield situation and the stagnant nature of the position of each side. The Ukrainians are not willing to bow down to Russian demands, and at the same time, the Russians are not willing to give any considerable concessions, and are not willing to relinquish any of their claims on the Ukrainian territories they have annexed back in 2022. The four oblasts, Zaporozhye, Kherson, Donetsk, and Lugansk, and combined the Russians now control about 70 to 80% of these territories. However, what is very interesting about the piece of news or the news item you just shared is that the Russian advances now are going beyond these four regions. These advances now are in the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. This oblast was never invaded by the Russians since the beginning of the war in 2022. Even in the initial major phase of the war in February and March of 2022, when Russia invaded several parts of Ukraine, the Russian army never reached Dnipropetrovsk, but now they are well within into the oblast. They have been so for about over a month, and they have captured more than a handful of settlements and villages, and they are advancing, which of course is jeopardizing the positions of the Ukrainian army in what remains under their control in both Zaporozhye and in Donetsk. So it seems that Russia is escalating. Russia is acquiring more and more territory, which means now that they will have even more cards to bargain with. The Russians have proposed an idea of territorial swaps in the previous round of negotiations in Turkey, when they said that we can give Ukraine some of their land back, as in lands in places like Sumy, Kharkiv, and Dnipropetrovsk, which are oblasts or provinces that are not claimed by Russia, in return for Ukraine withdrawing from the what remains under their control in the four oblasts annexed by Russia, the Donbass, Zaporozhye, and Kherson. So Russia is imposing a very tough predicament. Europe is unable to impose any significant pressure on Russia. The United States is reluctant to escalate further now with Russia and is seeking a peaceful resolution and is seeking to continue its rapprochement with Moscow, and for good reason, because this war was one of the most unfortunate decisions in history, basically. That the Europeans and the Americans have pushed Russia into invading Ukraine by insisting on NATO expansion, and by baiting Russia as such. There was this calculation, or miscalculation rather, that Russia can be drained out in this war, bleeded out, and taken out of the equation. What actually happened was Russia was very resilient and relentlessly resisted and persevered, and actually now is inflicting a major defeat on Ukraine, despite all of the pressure and the sanctions and even the battlefield losses and economic losses that Russia has incurred, Asuma.
Osman, please stay with us as we have a breaking news. Speaking at Russia's Security Council meeting, the Russian President Vladimir